Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this video tutorial, which is about the Kite Runner, and specifically about the events that take place in the Ghazi Stadium in chapter 21 of the novel. This video is aimed at students that are studying the novel as part of their A-level, for example, in English literature or English language and literature, but it could also be used to help those of you that are reading the novel for pleasure or are perhaps studying the novel for another course or at another level. In terms of what the Ghazi Stadium looks like, this is it. And as always with English literature, it's important to think about how you could use the events of chapter 21 to answer the question that is set. So for those of you that are studying Literature Spec B with AQA, it's important to make sure that you are answering the question. And just kind of a rule with any essay really is to make sure that you're on task. So all of these themes here, bullying, violence, injustice, and so on, are all themes which you could use the events of the Ghazi Stadium to discuss. So it's about using the right bits of the novel or the right moments of the novel in order to discuss a particular task that is set. So this is towards the end of the novel, only chapters to go or so. So let's just then go round in terms of a spider diagram, in terms of what the significance of the Ghazi Stadium could be. So the stoning is being used as a form of public education. It's what the Taliban are using to educate, and I use that term loosely, but to educate spectators in a warped and very horrific way. As is usually the case with totalitarian, tyrannical movements such as this, they will use punishment and violence as a way of ruling by using fear. And it acts as a warning. In other words, this could happen to you too if you're not careful, if you don't do what we say, if you break the rules that we have set. So, have your wits about you. And that, of course, creates a strong degree of paranoia because you never quite know who's watching. So, yes, this stoning acts as a warning to the people that are watching. If you look at the language that the cleric uses with his microphone, one of the things you see is the repetition of the word God. And of course, this reminds us that, as is the case with The Handmaid's Tale, that religion can be used as, and even manipulated, as a way to legitimize what an extreme political party or movement wants to do. So the Taliban is very much concerned with ruling by fear, using violence, eradicating Hazaras, and therefore the language is going to become theocratic because they are distorting religious doctrine in order to justify what they're doing. Of course, it's all lies. They have corrupted Islam for the purposes of this stoning. So as we've already said, using violence as a fear tactic, as a way of keeping control. And because people are so fearful and so paranoid, it means that they avoid dissenting and rebelling against you. None of the people in this stadium who are watching get up and leave, and none of them object to what they're seeing. The reason why is not because they don't like what they're seeing, it's because they daren't object, because they might get a bullet through their skull. So if that's the consequence and you value your life, why would you do it, I suppose? So the public feel too scared to go against the Taliban. You could link this to The Handmaid's Tale, this extreme totalitarian regime with the use of public executions to educate, in quotes, en masse. Specifically stoning. So in The Handmaid's Tale, towards the end of the novel, I think it's called the partisecution, where the handmaids are encouraged to stone a man to death who's accused of rape. I believe that man is actually innocent. So it goes to show the power that these kind of regimes have in convincing people to do the unthinkable because they daren't do otherwise. According to the Taliban, the couple who are being stoned to death are guilty of adultery and have therefore disrespected the sanctity of marriage. In political and social protest writing, there is this idea that the personal is always political, and you could ask yourself, what business is it of the government of the time to take an invested interest in your private life? Because breaking news, thousands of people have affairs every year. It's not something the government get involved with. However, that is not the case here, and they get involved with it because they're trying to find anything at all to justify this violent agenda. They are bloodthirsty. The Talib is wearing sunglasses, and of course this later turns out to be Asif. So spoiler alert, but it is Asif, and he's wearing sunglasses. And if you think the symbolism of the eyes, we often say the eyes are the windows to the soul. So to not be able to see the eyes is suggesting perhaps that he is soulless, and of course he is. There's a simile as well which references Jesus, which is ironic considering that Jesus was a sacrificial figure, and not befitting what we're witnessing here in terms of what Asif is doing and how he's treating his fellow citizens. So again, it goes to show the degree to which religion can be used to distort and to manipulate. Asif would probably like to be seen as a saviour wearing white, but that's not, of course, the case. There's also a reference to John Lennon's song Imagine, which was actually about peace, and yet that's not going to happen when this kind of thing is happening in this stadium. According to the cleric, the adulterers who are being stoned have spit in the face of God, or adulterers do that. So the Taliban have elected to become the moral police and act on God's behalf, corrupting religion to legitimize their own violent agenda. I've kind of already said that. Oops. Something else is Farid, who's sitting next to Amir, of course, watching this take place. He says, and they call themselves Muslims. And what Farid is hinting at there is how Islam is actually a religion of peace. And the Sharia law is a corruption of Islam. And it's what the Taliban are using to create their dystopian society. Of course, it's in their head, it's a utopia. They're doing this in their head to make Afghanistan better. People might, though, have other ideas. The football players don't wear shorts because it would be regarded as indecent exposure by the Taliban. If you think about it, just the utter gall and the irony of that, when you're stoning somebody to death in cold blood, are you the right person to comment on what's indecent or not? Of course not. But nobody dare say that to them because you would probably pay a price for that. And finally, a young boy, before they go into the stadium, is described as selling sexy pictures outside. They're not really pornographic. They're pictures of women, but they're not what we would consider pornographic. It's putting him in danger because sexually explicit material has been banned by the Taliban. And again, whenever you have a society which has more rules in it, you're always going to get more people doing things on the black market, in secret, as people try and get what they shouldn't have, essentially. And that's what's happening here. But a child is doing it. And again, that goes to show the corruption of innocence here. And just how, I haven't made a point here, but how this almost seems to be like some kind of warped, twisted half-time show. Because once the stoning has taken place, Amir says something like the second half was underway, the second half of this football match. And you think, oh my God, this audience, these spectators have been so desensitized to what they're seeing that they don't seem to question it anymore. It's just become normalized. And that's the scary thing, how the public have become blind to the brutality of what the Taliban are doing. So if you ever get a question about bullying or prejudice or the Taliban or cruelty or violence, etc., then the events of the Ghazi Stadium, as you can see, would be a great part of the novel to refer to. And all of that takes place in chapter 21. In terms of the plot, they have to go to the Ghazi Stadium to find Asif, and then they go to Asif in the next chapter. So that's why they're there. They haven't gone there through choice. They've gone there because they need to find Asif, because Asif has Sorab. So it all links together in terms of the plot progressing forward as well. Okay, so hopefully that was useful. All about the Kite Runner and the atrocious events of the Ghazi Stadium.